Hey everyone, welcome back to Newfangled in 2016. This is our very first video chat of the year. Hi, my name is Laura Jenkins if you're new to joining us, and I am the Young Adult Services Coordinator here at the Coeur d'Alene Public Library. So welcome to Newfangled if this is your first meeting. You chose a really great book to join us for the very first book of 2016. We are currently reading The Maze Runner by James Dashner. It's the first of the Maze Runner series, which has now concluded, but I guess they're coming out with a prequel book, which is coming out next September, so it's all about the origins of the maze. So if you're a fan of the series and you've already read all of them and you're looking for something new with this series and new from James Dashner, definitely take a look at that book when it comes out in September. Sounds like it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. So really looking forward to that one. And James Dashner also has a new series, and if you want to check that out, it's listed on the back cover of our book, so you can check it out. The very first book in the series is called The Eye of Minds, and that is available at the Hayden Library and also at the Coeur d'Alene Public Library. So if you want to check out that series from James Dashner, if you really like his writing style, I've heard that it is just as good as the Maze Runner series. So definitely check that out. If you want to let me know when you have logged on to Edmodo, go ahead and answer the opening question that I have listed there. It is, who is your favorite character so far and why? We have a whole cast of very interesting characters that are joining us for this book. We have Thomas, our main character, and then we have a couple of other boys that he's met in the Glade so far, Newt and Albie and Gally, and Ben, and obviously Chuck, so all sorts of different people that are joining him right now. So go ahead and respond to that question about who your favorite character is so far. My favorite character so far is Newt. I just think he's one of the funniest people in the book so far, and he seems like the most genuine and kind-hearted person in the book so far. So we'll talk a little bit about all of these different characters and talk a little bit about whether they hold any symbolism in their existence in the book or what their purpose is in the general book. It looks like so far we have Shelby and Jackie and Megan that have joined us. Thank you guys so much for logging on and for joining us for this very first chat for the year. I know it's a very quick chat, especially after school just started this past Monday, so thank you guys for logging on and joining us. Let me get a sip of water. And Shelby is saying that her favorite character has to be the girl that's in the coma because the book's foreshadowing that she's going to be really important in the story and that she is going to change life in the Glade. So yes, this girl comes in and interrupts this entire way of life that they have. The very first girl that they've ever had join them through the box, which is basically the giant elevator that brings boys up into this Glade prison area, or it seems like a prison. We're not really sure what it is right now. Jackie is saying hello, and Megan is saying that her favorite character so far is either Newt or Minho. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. I'm going to call him Minho, but I'm probably incredibly wrong because I haven't watched the movie, so I don't know the official pronunciation. So if I butcher any of these names, go ahead, call me out on it on Edmodo. If you are joining us and listening to the chat right now, make sure that you are also logged on to the edmodo.com website so that you can respond to some of the different questions that we have for you. We do have a couple of discussion questions for you today, but mostly I want to talk about some of the different symbolism that's going on in this first about 90 or so pages that we've read for this very first section of the book. So Dylan has joined us as well. Welcome, Dylan. And he says, I've already torn through the book, so I need some reference as to where we are at. Also, Newt is the best. I totally agree with you, Dylan. This is my second time reading this book, and Newt is definitely my favorite character. Right now, we are talking about chapters 1 through 14, which is going to be pages 1 through 95. And at the very end of our section, what we have hit as far as action so far, Ben just got banished from the Glade. So this was a very, very dramatic scene that we're talking about. A boy basically being sentenced to death is what it is. So it is the Glade's equivalent of a death punishment without them having to actually inflict the death upon the person that is being banished. So a very, very important scene. We're going to talk about that a little later on. Jake has also joined us. His favorite character is personally Thomas. Okay, well that's a really good favorite character to pick, especially since he has had the most interaction with us so far as a character. He's a very questioning and inquisitive kind of person, and he wants to know what's going on, and he has this huge desire to be involved in the efforts of the boys in order to figure out what their situation is, who they are, and why they are there. So definitely a good person to have as your favorite character, Jake. All right. We are going to dig right in, but one more thing first. Oh, let's see. We need the group code. Oh, let me see if I can find it. Just one second, Shelby. I know that I have it somewhere around here. The group code to join the Edmodo group, just in case you are watching this and have a friend that's trying to contact you to become part of the group, is R6VR8Y, and let me just send that to you, Shelby, on Edmodo as well. So hold on just one second so that we can get Shelby and her friend all set up to join as well. 8Y. ER8Y. Okay. There, I just responded to you, Shelby, so you should be able to get your friend the code. We're going to go ahead and get started, though, just so that we can kind of cover all of the different things. We're already not going to be able to cover everything that I want to talk about from this section, but just a brief intro as to what we're doing for the first 3 months of 2016. We're doing book-to-movie adaptations, so novels that have been turned into movies. I hope you guys know that The Maze Runner has, since its publication, been turned into a film. So what we are going to be doing with these books is going through and having our weekly discussions and everything, and then for the end of the month meeting where we all get together face-to-face, we're actually going to be getting together and watching the movies together, and after the movie having a discussion about what the differences are between the book and the movie, which we liked better, and kind of what the different choices were made in order to turn a book into a movie. So this very first month, we're going to be talking about The Maze Runner by James Dashner. In February, we're going to be talking about the classic Princess Bride by William Goldman. And then in March, our last book to movie, we're going to be talking about The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, which is set in World War II and follows a couple of different young characters as they get up to some thievery in World War II Germany. So we're going to learn all about Liesel and her life in Germany. It's going to be a ton of fun. So I think it's Liesel. Yeah. All right. So getting into our discussion about The Maze Runner, we are going to talk about a couple of different topics. And the very first thing that I want to preface this with, it's going to be kind of like a little bit of an English lesson, so I'm sorry for those of you that just started back up with school. We're going to talk a little bit more school right now because it's important in talking about a book that is as deep as The Maze Runner, because there is a ton of action happening and a ton of characterization happening in this book, but there's also a ton of symbolism that can be drawn from this. So we want to make sure that we're not only getting the base level of the story, we're also getting deeper than that and getting to learn about what all of these different things that James Dashner is including really mean. So on that note, we're going to talk a little bit about author intentions. So every time that an author makes a decision when they are choosing whether or not to include something in a book, or whether, say, this prison is going to be underwater or going to be on land in the middle, set in the middle of a maze, they are making an intentional decision. And they're including those elements for a reason, usually. Sometimes not so much. Sometimes they just need to throw in, like, I don't know, a thing of cotton candy for funsies. But with a lot of the decisions that are made in The Maze Runner, from the language to the setting to even some of the different characters' names, they are very important decisions, and they reflect on what the author is eventually trying to get us to understand with their work. So even things like colors, character names, genders play a huge role in the Maze Runner series. and settings, all of those are chosen intentionally to affect how the reader perceives the story. So there are a couple of things that we notice that are author decisions that are made right off the bat in the book. So one thing is that the story is told from Thomas's point of view. We start the book with Thomas coming up from the box. He's very disoriented. He suddenly experiences this huge amount of memory loss where he just does not know what is going on at all. And let's just see. Okay, so Shelby said thank you. Just want to make sure I'm keeping up on Edmodo. Looks like we're all caught up. Sweet. So Thomas is coming up in the box, and we find out that it is not told from Thomas's point of view specifically. So it's not first person. Thomas is not literally telling us this story. He's not saying, oh, I'm lost, it's dark in here, I can't see anything, I can only feel these rough walls, but I can feel this platform shaking. No. What we instead are reading is called third person limited point of view, which means that we are experiencing this from outside of Thomas's head, but we're also privy to all of the different emotions, fears, feelings, and thoughts that that Thomas is experiencing. So that's a very, very important decision that James Dashner made in this book. Instead of telling it from a first-person perspective, or instead of telling it from multiple different perspectives, he chose to tell this specifically from Thomas's point of view, but outside of Thomas's mind. So that is something that's incredibly important, and a question that I have for you guys, actually a series of different questions. Sorry for this like massive block of questions that's going to be coming your way. But my question for you is, how do you think telling the story from the third person limited point of view affects how we as readers view the story? So would the story be different if we were reading it directly from Thomas's point of view, saying like, I went, I did, I heard? Or do you think it would be much the same as the third person limited? And then also, would it be different if it were told, well, directly by Thomas? And then do you think it would be different if it was told from multiple viewpoints of boys in the Glade? So a couple of really interesting questions for you guys. Shelby has a question for all of us. Do you picture the Glade as a place full of grass, flowers, waterfalls, and vines, or a place full of metal and stone? And Jackie is saying mostly metal and stone, but having grass and trees. I don't see it having waterfalls. I don't really see it having waterfalls too, but that would be kind of cool. I feel like it would be a little better if there were waterfalls, right? I wouldn't feel inclined to be as much of a runner if there were waterfalls in the Glade. Jake said, I perceive it as a stone drab enclosure. That's what the impression was that I got from it as well, Jake. We're going to talk a little bit more about setting in a couple minutes too, but really good question for the group, Shelby. And if you guys have any questions for each other, go ahead and post them on Edmodo. Start talking about them. Let's get some really good discussion going about this book. Okay, so another thing that we notice right off the bat that James Dashner has chosen to do with this book, the chapters are incredibly short, so it feels like you're reading at top speed, right? I love the short chapter lengths because it makes me feel like I'm doing a lot. I'm a pretty slow reader, but when you have chapters that are this short, it really makes it seem like you're reading very quickly, and it makes the action feel like it's going so much faster too. So definitely made me feel like I'm a fast reader, but why do you think James Dashner chose to make the chapters so short? And do you think this format is important to the pacing of the story? Do you think this is a fast-paced story? Do you think it's moving pretty slowly so far? Or do you think that a lot has happened? So let me just throw that question up on Edmodo for you guys, and you can go ahead and respond to that now while we're having the chat, or you can respond to it later. Or if you want to watch the archive later, if you are watching the archive later, and if you are watching the archive now and it is later, go ahead and go back to Edmodo and respond to those questions, because we want to get some really good discussion generated about this book because it is so awesome. All right, so other things that we notice right off the bat, because it's pretty blatantly obvious, at least it is to a girl like me. Boys, boys, boys! The entire Glade is only filled with boys until the coming of the one girl, which is going to be a huge catalyst for the action starting for this book. So boys, boys, boys. They are all boys. All of the characters until the girl arrives in the box are boys, and not just boys, but teenage boys. How many times can I say boys in 1 minute? But they're all teenage boys, and they are aged 13 to 17, basically, from what Thomas is able to interpret. So Why do you think James Dashner chose to revolve the story around teens? And also, why do you think he chose to revolve the story around teen boys? Um, what do you think? Why do you think the Glade is populated by boys? How would this story be different if the main characters had been girls? Would the story be different if the main characters were girls? And how different would it be if there had been adults in the Glade as well as kids? So let me go ahead and put that chunk of questions up there for you as well. Sorry for the misspelling in that. I just realized there's a misspelling. And Shelby's question is, what genre do you think this book is? I would call it science fiction, but also with a hint of like dystopian themes in there. So dystopian as in like it seems like the ideal society, but actually it's very different. And then I won't say what other genre it is because there's another type of genre that I think it fits into, but it's kind of a spoiler. So we're going to go ahead and move on with this if you guys want to respond to that question. Thanks, Nicole, for joining us. It's okay that you're late. Don't worry. We're just going through and talking about some of the different things, and I'm already halfway through my chat, but I've only made it a third of the way, actually a fifth of the way through my discussion notes. So we're going to keep motoring. All right. We're going to skip that question. It doesn't mean much. All right. Well, it means a lot, but we need to talk about the setting because that is what the first part of this book is all about. The first 100 pages or so are really dedicated to what's called exposition. Exposition is the part of the book where everything is kind of introduced. You meet the characters, you meet the setting, you meet what is going on, and the problem that everybody is facing is introduced to you. And then exposition ends when you have what's called a catalyst or an inciting incident. So the inciting incident for us basically is when the girl arrives. So the girl arrives and she predicts, she gives this big important note that says everything is going to change. And she is the last one. Let's see. I didn't mark down what page that is on. Anyway, it's somewhere in here. But it's a really, really important moment in the book because it literally says she is the last one. So saying nobody else is going to be coming. So this monthly delivery of a new person that has been happening for years is now coming to an end. That is the inciting incident in this book, saying that there is never going to be another person joining them. And now they really have to figure out what is going on because things are going to get really bad really fast if they no longer have the same deliveries and supplies that are coming to them, if that's what this note really, really means. Okay, so like I said, halfway through our section, we really get this catalyst, the arrival of the girl, and then we get some rising action once we hit the banishment of Ben. So we get to learn a little bit more about the society and the rules that are at play with this, and we get to learn a little bit more about everything that's going on in the Glade. Okay, so let's talk about the characters a little bit. Since that was our introductory question, who's your favorite character so far? We're going to talk a little bit about all of them. Not all of them, but I mean like most of them. So Thomas, he's our main character. He is seemingly built with a single purpose in mind, and that is to question things and question absolutely everything. I don't think there's a single page where Thomas doesn't have a question in this book. I challenge you to find it if there is. All right. So everything. He questions every little thing, and he's driven by two purposes right now. To figure out who he is and where he came from, and to figure out the maze. So very early on, he decides that he knows nothing about being a runner, but that is what he wants to be. He wants to be one of the people that is actively working towards figuring out the situation that they are in. Okay, moving on. We have Albie. Albie is the leader of our little ragtag band of misfits that live in the Glade. He's motivated by maintaining order. So he is the leader of this group, and he lives and thrives off of order. So that's the only way that he thinks that everyone is going to be safe and everybody is going to be able to continue with their lives, is by maintaining some sense of order in the Glade. Whether it's sticking to their jobs, not causing any problems, and basically following the rules. So it makes him out to be a bit of a jerk in the grand scheme of things, but his intentions are all very pure. In that he's not going to cause problems or kind of like assert his leadership unless he absolutely has to. So that's something to think about with Albie, because he does seem very stern and very harsh, but you can tell that even with the banishment of Ben, all of these things that he's doing are for a good purpose. He knew that he had to banish Ben because without order, and this is the very last thing that he says to Ben, let's see. His very last thing that he says to Ben, which is really him saying, like, I regret having to do this to you, but I have to because it keeps everyone else safe. So he says, if we let Shanks like you get away with that stuff, Albie said, we never would have survived this long. Which basically shows, like, I'm regretting this, but you broke the rules. I have to do this. I'm bound to the rules. So that's Albie's character. All right, we also have Chuck, which is kind of like one of my cute little favorite characters, but gosh, is he a cookie cutter of a character. So there he is, the chubby, lonely, friendless sidekick. And he doesn't really want to start out as Thomas's sidekick, but the more and more we read, the more and more it does seem like he is. So he's the first friend that Thomas is able to make in the Glade, a debatable point. We'll talk about that a little. And he has just enough pitiable qualities that really make Thomas look at him as like a younger brother sort of character and make him a little soft on the kid. So he's the first person that really introduces Thomas to the different aspects of the Glade and the walls and the maze. So he's really the only one that's kind of giving some answers to the questions that Thomas is asking. So obviously Thomas is going to like him because Thomas is just full of questions. All right, Newt. Newt is the perfect foil to Albie because he is a leader without being overbearing. So where Albie is harsh and he's to the point and he's like, oh, no, this is the way it is, this is the way the rules are, Newt is more like, let me be calm and funny and kind about all of these things, but I'm still going to get things done. So he's easygoing, he's friendly, and he's ready to pop out a joke at any minute. You could argue that Newt is really Thomas's first friend because when Thomas first comes out of the box, Albie goes to shake his hand, but he absolutely flat out declines it. And as soon as Newt puts out his hand, Thomas is like, oh yeah, I'll shake your hand. No biggie, I think I like you. So you could argue that Newt is kind of Thomas's first friend in the Glade. Okay, so Zach has a question up for all of you guys on Edmodo. His question for you is, what would you have done about the fate of Ben? So that's a really good question to respond to, and I definitely encourage you to do that because I don't think I'm going to be able to get that far. All right, breezing through the rest of the characters, Gally, we literally have Gally, who is like Snape from Harry Potter if you cut off Harry Potter at the Prisoner of Azkaban when Snape is still incredibly evil. All right, so basically he is just there to thwart Thomas's every move and every thought. He's described as greasy with stringy hair, nasty teeth, and just about every quality that one would pin on a stereotypical bad guy. He's gone through the changing, which we later find out has something to do with the Grievers, and being stung, which we haven't really gotten an explanation for. So he really has it out for Thomas from the get-go. We're just going to keep moving because we've got to get through this. All right, Ben isn't really a main character, but he's kind of banished at the end of our section, so he's probably not going to come up anymore in the book. So we kind of have to talk about him right now. So Ben is a bit crazy, but it isn't his fault. He's going through the changing, which is what Gally went through, and everybody is different after the changing. So when that is over, well, yeah, he's still crazy. So obviously something has to be done about him. He goes after Thomas and tries to kill Thomas in the middle of the forest. He bites a chunk out of his shoulder, and probably doesn't bite a chunk out, but he bites his shoulder. And he really is important in the story for a couple of different reasons. One, he illustrates the changing in an up-close and personal kind of way for Thomas. This is the first experience that Thomas has really had of the Grievers, which are this large, looming thing that he doesn't know too much about right now. So we get to see the changing up close and personal, and then Ben also serves as an example of the rigid rule structure that is governing the Glade right now. So he breaks a rule when he assaults Thomas, and he gets banished, and that's the end of the story. There is no exception to that. Yes, he's going through the changing. That sucks. Guess what? You're still going to be banished. So pretty harsh rules in the Glade. Obviously is going to be a very rigid structure to what is going on there. All right, and then we have this nebulous idea of the creators that have been mentioned a couple of times. They're the ones that are obviously putting the beetle blades into there. They're the ones that are giving them food and electricity, and then sending water and animals when they need them. So they're also sending in more boys and one girl. All right, new things. We're going to talk a little bit about the Glade because you guys had questions about what the Glade is pictured as. So we're just going to go to page 5 of our books. And if you have your book in front of you, you can read along with me. All right, page 5 is where we get the first real description of the Glade. They stood in a vast courtyard several times the size of a football field, surrounded by 4 enormous walls made of gray stone and covered in spots with thick ivy. The walls had to be hundreds of feet high, and formed a perfect square around them, each side split in the exact middle by an opening as tall as the walls themselves that, from what Thomas could see, led to passages and long corridors beyond. And then this description continues on page 7. The floor of the courtyard looked like it was made of huge stone blocks, many of them cracked and filled with long grasses and weeds. An odd, dilapidated wooden building near one of the corners of the square contrasted greatly with the gray stone. A few trees surrounded it, their roots like gnarled hands digging into the rock floor for food. Another corner of the compound held gardens. From where he was standing, Thomas recognized corn, tomato plants, fruit trees. Across the courtyard from there stood wooden pens holding sheep and pigs and cows. A large grove of trees filled the final corner. The closest ones looked crippled and close to dying. The sky overhead was cloudless and blue, but Thomas could see no sign of the sun despite the brightness of the day. The creeping shadows of the walls didn't reveal the time or direction. It could be early morning or late afternoon. As he breathed in deeply, trying to settle his nerves, a mixture of smells bombarded him. Freshly turned dirt, manure, pine, something rotten, and something sweet. Somehow he knew these were the smells of a farm. So that's our basic setting of the Glade. Walls are covered in ivy. In some sections it almost obscures the walls themselves. On page 43 we have a description of the actual structure of the Glade. So we learned that it isn't just like this massive expanse of like beautiful grasses and old stone. No, we actually have a description of different sections that this has been divided into. Again, we're talking about like rigid social structure and basically a very structured lifestyle that they lead in this place. So we have the gardens, bloodhouse, homestead, and deadhead. So the gardens are where all the things are grown. This is on page 43 if you want to refresh your memory. The bloodhouse is where all the animals are kept. Kind of funny that it's not called like a stable or a barn or like Animal House. No, it's called the bloodhouse. Kind of an interesting choice of words. And again, we're talking about author intentionality. There's a reason that he wrote bloodhouse instead of the barn. Okay, homestead, which is where their house is, where they take care of people, things like that. That dilapidated building that we talked about earlier. And then the deadheads, and that's where all the trees are. So that little forest where Thomas discovers the cemetery is. So where all of the boys are buried that, you know, died of all sorts of different things, as we find out. Okay, so a really great description there. We also get a description on page 24 of the doors, so leading out into the maze, and that's when Thomas really figures out, like, because Chuck slips up, that this is a maze, and these people have set them not only into, like, this giant walled prison, but a prison that is set into the middle of a maze. And again, I'm saying prison, but I don't necessarily mean prison. That's just what Thomas has referred to it as several times in this section. So keep that in mind, those of you that have read the rest of the series. I don't actually mean prison, or do I? Okay, so other things that are present in this Glade setting, the windows, which is what Newt leads Thomas to in the early hours, the wee hours of the morning, to go and see his very first griever, which absolutely scares the crap out of him, or I should say scares the clunk out of him. And then one question that I have for you guys, why put windows into the walls of the Glade? What could be the purpose of windows beyond simply being able to see what's happening in the maze on the other side? So let me just pop that question up for you guys, because that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. Why would somebody want them to be able to see the grievers, for instance? Why do you think the creators thought that it would be a good idea to put windows into these walls? All right, moving on. Grievers are part of the setting. Even though they're actually kind of an antagonist, they're also just included in this general setting and create a sense of danger for us. So grievers are the straightforward antagonists of our story, and they attack anything that comes in their path and terrify the boys beyond all belief. They sound like giant slugs with like needles poking out of them. So I don't know. I find that to be disgusting. So I would probably be very terrified. Okay. Uh, mazes. That is the bigger setting of this, and that is where we have symbolism start coming into play now that we have 1 minute left in our chat. Let's talk about mazes. So when is a maze not a metaphor? And for those of you that don't know what a metaphor is, let me just give you like this little Webster definition. It's when one thing is regarded as representative or symbolic of something else, especially something abstract. And abstract meaning like this nebulous thought, like thoughts are something abstract, or like I'm trying to think, like freedom is an abstract idea. Things like that you can't really like point to and say like that is freedom, but something that kind of requires a little bit more thought. So think more generally, what is the purpose of a maze? Mazes are literally created to confuse you and may cause you to get lost and disoriented with the possibility of not having a solution. You can't have a maze that literally does not have a solution. You just end right up back where you started. So mazes have dead ends, multiple paths you can follow, and don't necessarily always end where you think they will. They may include obstacles, some dangerous, and others simply annoying. So what are other bigger, more abstract things that are confusing, cause you to get lost and disoriented, and may very well not have a solution or answer or purpose? Let's talk about mazes as symbols. Life. Let's talk about mazes as a symbol for life. Okay, as in mazes, there are many different paths that can be followed in life. Lots of and I know it's 5 o'clock. I'm sorry, guys. We're going to go just a little bit over. Okay. So lots of obstacles, some of them being dangerous, and many instances where you can make the wrong choice and have to retrace your steps in order to find a new solution. Confusing? Check. Annoying at times? Definitely check. Ending where you expect it to? Possibly, but probably not. So what's extra special about the maze in our book as a symbol for life is that the walls in the maze itself are constantly changing, much like the different circumstances that we face in our lives are constantly changing. So we might continue as a single, straightforward, one person, I am me, and I will always ever only be me, but all of the people around us are changing. All of the circumstances in the world around us are constantly changing. So think about it that same way. The Glade can be continuing in its basic, status quo, but everything around it is changing. So you can be taking these same runners and you can be putting them on the same path, but they're never going to be able to go the same way. They're encountering different obstacles and different paths that they have to take every single day. So very much like life. They're trying to find the same solution, but sometimes you have to take different paths to get to it. Much like life. Same thing, rules change, people change, circumstances change, just like the walls in our book. And the evil grievers that haunt the maze, guess what? They could represent a lot of different things. It talks about them being very unexpected. You can turn a corner and run into one at any time, much like you can turn a corner in life and be driving down the road and get in a car accident. So grievers could stand for very odd and random things that happen in life, like car accidents, or having a particularly evil teacher in your life, or maybe even something as basic as having a food allergy. So you have a peanut allergy, and all of a sudden you eat a peanut, and you're dead one day. I'm sorry for those of you that have peanut allergies. But they're like grievers of our everyday life. Okay, other things that contribute to the setting, because setting isn't just about where you are in a story, it can also be other bigger nebulous things like language. Language is something that hits you right off the bat in this book because they have so many words that are so confusing, like clunk and shank and, I don't know, track hose. What the heck is a track hoe? We still don't know. Or like med jacks. What is a med jack? Nobody knows until they finally explain it. So why do you think these boys felt like they had to come up with their own unique language for this land? What is important about them not using the words that we have? They don't call these boys that are taking care of other boys doctors. They don't call them nurses. They call them med jacks. Why is that important in the story? Because that is something that is an incredibly unique aspect of this story. Okay. We have a lot of other things that we could talk about right now, but I don't want to keep you guys any longer than you possibly have to. I'm going to throw up that last question. Why do you think they came up with their own language and words? How does it help them to cope with their environment? Because nobody is really happy to be in this new place. So how is it helping them cope with this new environment? And what does it tell you about the characters and their connection to each other? The words that they use to relate to each other. What is that telling you about who they are? Okay, so that's going to be one of your last questions up on Edmodo. I have One more closing question for you. I actually have a whole ton of questions that I'm going to post for you later. If you want to respond to them, you definitely can, but I just did not have enough time to fit them into the discussion today. But my closing question for you: if you found yourself in Thomas's shoes, would your first instinct to be to assume the fetal position and just give up? Or do you think you would hit the ground running and try to find a way out? So this is your big question for the end of the day. And then just a couple of quick announcements for y'all. Yes, I said y'all. Sorry about that. Okay, our next meeting is going to be next Thursday. We are going to be reading chapters 15 through 29, I believe. Let me just double check on that. Okay. Let me just double check and give you the page numbers too. All right, January 14th, Edmodo meeting. It'll be online again, another digital chat. We'll be reading chapters 15 through 29, which is going to be pages 96 through 190. That sounds like a huge chunk of pages, but like I said, short chapters, really large text, reads very, very quickly, especially because guess what? Next part's going to be full of rising action because we got through all the exposition in this part. So this is going to be an action-packed chunk of book. Get ready for it. So, another announcement for all of you guys. At the end of the month, we are going to be showing the Maze Runner film, like I said at the beginning. And it is going to be happening for free for you, your family, and your friends at Hayden Discount Cinemas. We don't have an exact date and we don't have an exact time, but as soon as we do have those items in place, we will be announcing them at the digital chats. We will be putting those posted up on Edmodo. We'll be posting them on the website. If you don't know what the website is, go ahead and head over to newfangledbookclub.wordpress.com, and you'll be able to find out all of the reading assignments. You'll be able to view all of the chat archives from the past forever for Newfangled, and you'll be able to see reading assignments for the coming weeks. You'll be able to watch the movie trailers for the books that we're doing, and then you will also be able to access a couple of other resources that we have for you, important links and whatnot. So thank you guys so much for joining me in this chat this week. I'm so sorry that we went over our time, but there's so much to discuss from this book. There's so many important things that are going on. I hope you enjoyed it. Give us a shout out on Edmodo if there's more things that you want to talk about. Looks like there are a lot more questions being posted by other teens on the site right now. So Shelby has a really great question about the origins of the maze, and a lot of really great responses. Thank you guys for being such a great group for the discussion today, and hopefully we will catch you next week. Have a great time.